Commissioner Meredith Brett. Commissioner Joseph Cruz.
Present.
Commissioner Ashley Arianes. Commissioner Joseph Dominguez.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have a quorum.
Doke, I'm going to ask Ashley to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I second that.
And I'll get out of the way.
Why would you do that to me? Second, I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the
Okay.
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, in front of us, we've got the agenda, and I'll entertain a motion if someone would like to make one for approval of the agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Ashley and Joe. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next item is approval of the minutes of February 5th, February 26th, 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, right? There's 2 days, February 5th and February 26th, so we can do them together if everything's fine, or individually.
I make a motion to approve both minutes. I didn't see nothing in them that needed amendments
Okay.
or anything like that.
There's a motion, is there a second? There's a motion and a second, that's Joe and Ashley. Any comments, questions, suggestions, modifications, since we're doing both? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, we have no public input this afternoon. So moving on to our discussion items. Our first item is suggestions from City Manager Tim Montgomery.
And I want to welcome you back to your chambers, Mr. City Manager. Hopefully your position in the facility isn't too awkward. We had to arm wrestle the attorney to move him off of that place over there, so, but he won.
That's okay. Gina's a good friend, so it's okay. You may borrow my chair.
It worked.
If you haven't noticed, I'm super relaxed. It's amazing. You know, I think I got up like 15 minutes later today, and it's interesting. I'm in vacation mode for sure. But thank you for having me here. I know I have seen each of you in different meeting environments, different situations, and it's good to see you all, but we haven't really got to know each other a whole lot. So I hope to get to learn more about you too. Before I go into this, just want to call out my background. I've spent 30 years in finance, CEO, CFO positions. About half of my career was in government, quasi-government, working. I was a CFO for the city of Austin. Now I'm in this role here. I've also worked for the state of Texas and also the University of California for the president's office. The other half of my career was all corporate finance, publicly traded. And so having the combination of the two different arenas, I've seen a lot of different management models. I've seen government city charters established in different mechanisms and been able to experience them both. And so as I first started going through the charter, I was in that mindset of what type of edits and rewriting and so forth would I do. And I don't think that that's actually the most productive, thing for me to give you, because I think you've had so much more discussion and you know the direction you're going there. So I turned my focus over to how do each of these different elements within the city charter impact the operations within the city or even my role. And so that's really where I was taking the focus. And I hope that would work for you. Do you want me to just kind of start and take you through?
Let me just ask you a question, Mr. City
Absolutely.
Manager. Tim, you mentioned you worked for the city of Austin.
Mm-hmm.
I know that this is much more comprehensive than that little town in Texas. But I
that
have
little
to
town.
probably admit that you have the whole gamut here,
Yeah,
you know, and utilities included, you know, so
yeah.
probably a little more different, but in some cases, it's more accustomed to our makeup. But when I talk to people about the makeup of our town, one of the interesting things about our makeup is we do have utilities. A lot of communities have one or two or none at all. We have 4. So that makes it a lot more interesting.
So,
Definitely having enterprise funds makes, it makes a difference. It definitely adds an element of complexity. Although the city of Austin also had more of what would be your DOT. We were in charge of all of the interstate systems, the transit systems, the airport. We had many different elements. Large city, very, very active. We had 9 on the governing body, 9 individuals, but it was very different. And in the beginning, I was in that role 6 years, and in the beginning, we had some of the same challenges that we have here, that I experience here, but we also maneuvered through them. And that's one of my goals, is to talk about that.
So I guess go ahead and start. I guess we'll try to keep up with you. We do have different pieces that we've worked on already. A lot of them include, a lot of the work that the city manager does. So if you can just give us sort of a heads up of what area you may be talking about, it might be easier for us to track.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Gino, for sure, if you have anything, jump in at any time.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I think for me, the starting point is under Article 2, Section 2.02, the powers and duties. Letter B, all corporate powers reside within the governing body as a whole, and no individual member, except as otherwise provided herein, shall direct the activities of the city manager, appointed employees, or other employees. That one stands out to me quite a bit. In my experience here, I was appointed on interim basis in December, and then took it on full-time in February, December of '23. And so what I experience is there's a lot of communication from every counselor and mayor with me directly, which should be that way to help guide me and give me a direction of where I should be going. But there's an enormous amount of communication that takes place with the directors and managers, and causes conflict with me in my daily operations. And I may use names, but as an example, I had a meeting set up just recently for our joint powers agreement for the animal shelter. And it's been difficult to pull that meeting together because of the pulling the entity between the county and myself. Finally had the meeting on the calendar, had chief of police in there and other individuals, and then I would have a council member set up a different meeting and pulled those people out of that meeting and would go on to do something else. I find that highly inappropriate because I see the directors as my resources to conduct daily business. And when things happen from an individual, it can impact my day and my ability to move forward. So B is a real big one for me. I feel that there needs to be a true teamwork. The governing body needs to serve as a team, give me guidance, and let me reach out to the directors as needed. I don't feel comfortable with things happening without me knowing. I got into a meeting just Monday where a director had been approached again by a different counselor, and this happened to be it is in response to a constituent that had been concerned about some road work that was taking place. And so what I found is that counselor had gone to the director, spoke to them, supported them for what their concerns were, and gave hope that something was going to go a certain direction. When they came to my office for the meeting, that constituent has already gone through about 6 different directors and counselors in combination, and what they're requesting is not part of our scope. And so if I can recommend a governing body come in through me, I can at least filter what has already been done or not have conflicting information out there. And so I just feel it's important to call that out. I have a list of examples, but I don't think I need to go through those. But I do meet with the governing body, each counselor individually on a weekly to a bi-weekly basis. And in each one of those meetings, I walk away with a list of things to address that come from that counselor, not the governing body. So,
If I may ask you a question. So is there something or a protocol in place that states ethical or chain of command that counselors should not go to directors individually?
Letter B, all corporate powers reside within the governing body as a whole and no individual member.
Except as otherwise provided herein, shall direct the activities of the city manager, appointed employees, which are directors, or other employees. So it's right there.
So what you want is in writing.
What I feel is, what I did with Austin, the governing body is there to support the constituents and hear the constituents' needs and filter that information into the city so we can address it. I built a portal, had a portal done so that everything came into the executive office, which is where I resided. Everything came into the executive office and was filtered then out to the staff to address, came back in through the portal and was dispersed back to the governing body, so that there was no overlap, there was no conflicting resolution or action taken. And so that's something that I feel would be very beneficial. Holding individuals with me, I'm fine with, because I report to the governing body. And I need to be told if a constituent needs something, or if I need to speak to them, or if there is a goal that we want to achieve. The challenge that I find with letter B is the governing body does not have defined goals. We have a master plan, has never once been brought up since I have been in my position. The goals are not established, and so it's individuals working and coming to me with their goals. I can name off with the 5 different individuals. I know the personalities of each one of them and what I'm going to hear each week, and they're very personal, very individualized focus. So I hope I'm giving you input that can be helpful, because I think if it's not written in the charter, then I think that there needs to be an offsetting consequence or a corrective action to get us back on track. So I'm not here to just complain, I promise.
So the creation of this portal would be the solution?
That would be my recommendation.
And what would it take to create that?
I'd need to pull in the IT team. We need to develop just a database, basically, that can be accessed online through the city website. It would be a simple form where the individual submitting that form they'd be able to put what the project is or what the issue is that needs to be addressed. It would date stamp it when they hit that submit button. I would get, on the other end then, a list of all of those requests or all those forms that come through. We can address them, mark them as complete, and then be able to return that form with any attachments of what the work was. It just depends on the issue. But we can have flow of communication that way.
So the request would come from city councilors and directors?
It would come from, yes, the governing body would submit the request.
As a body?
I'm sorry?
As a body?
Yes, if we keep it as a body that's supposed to make those decisions of what the priorities are or what the goals are. The city of Austin, we did not. We had constituent requests flow from the counselors into the executive office. So individual counselors can definitely submit information. But what it does though is it creates a log, so we know the time that request came in, what the request is, what the resolution is. We could also track how long it took, but it would also prevent duplication of effort. It would allow the executive office to assign that work out to the employees. And in doing so, we then know where there's meeting conflicts or if there's other priorities in place. We prioritize that work then, and that's not something we have now.
Who would be able to see the portal?
The governing body. So there's going to have to be a login because there should be different mechanisms for constituents. Like we have TextMyGov as an example. There's a communication platform that is being implemented now for the constituents. We definitely want them to be heard. I don't want them to have to call all around. I want a very centralized point, whether it's TextMyGov or one number that constituents can call. And we have a decision tree that would go with that. But for the governing body, it needs to be separate.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. City Manager. Mr. Attorney, City Attorney Gino, what is your experience with that type of language in the charter? And the reason I ask that is because we've covered other areas, and it seems this is similar in terms of there's other areas within the charter that specify city councilors are part of personnel management, for example. Well, not exactly like that, but that's the definition as I read it, right? So if a director or a city department, no action can be taken without the city council's approval, city manager, and so forth. That's unique to Las Vegas because other communities have that a bit differently, where a city manager can manage those outside of public safety. This seems to be somewhat tied to that because I can see what the way that piece of the charter reads causes confusion because there is no clear direct line of report. They're kind of skewed. That director, that manager, that whoever it is, has multiple lines of report. And which one do they follow? So I can see how that causes some, maybe matters that aren't handled as efficiently as they could be. What's your take on that portion? And have we already changed it? Because I don't have that section in front of me right now.
Sure. A few answers. Let's start with the background. Municipalities throughout the state, typically based on size, range from your smaller communities, your more hands-on communities, are that the governing body hires and fires every single employee of the municipality. That usually occurs in your smallest municipalities. As it starts getting larger and you move from a simple mayor-council structure into a mayor-council administrator or manager model, as you start moving into a city manager, then that authority starts shifting into a city manager. You have a limited number of appointees, like a clerk. It's typically a clerk, a finance director, and a manager. That's where it sort of starts with the appointees, and the manager manages everybody. And then you get a little bit bigger, maybe there are a couple more direct appointments. And then you'll move over to someone like a city of Santa Fe, which I use pretty frequently in my examples, where a city manager has all personnel authority over department directors and personnel, except for the appointees. So it's that whole range. When you get into charter, you're going to define that role. And we've run into a few things in charter where there are inconsistencies. The biggest example, later when we review the things that I produced earlier today, so I don't fault anyone for not reading them in the last 2 hours. But some of the things we've been working on is cleaning up the inconsistencies. One example outside of this range was when does the mayor vote or not vote? Here it says the whole governing body votes, but here it says mayor only votes in a tie. Let's clean that up. Let's pick whether a mayor votes in a tie or votes in all votes, and then make it consistent. This is an example. Mr. Montgomery, City Manager Montgomery, has raised or pointed out this paragraph in section 2.02B, which says no individual member may direct the activities of the manager, appointed employees, or other employees. But as you're going to see later when we get into the employees side, they get to hire and fire, and all the way down to department directors and a city manager who's supposed to have authority over all employees. Here, in another section, says, oh no, we didn't. We still have authority over your.
It's not consistent, yeah.
So we've got to pick what that model looks like and how that goes forward. We did do an initial review, and I have done initial edits. It's not at a proposal stage, but it's at a review of language. We'll go over it later, but the edits that are in, I want to say, Article 6, Those edits are that the city manager has authority over the hiring and firing of the exempt department directors. So it's, again, for the council ultimately, for the commission's recommendations, but for the council's decision ultimately, be consistent. Which is it? Are you granting authority? Are you not granting authority?
Let me jump in if you don't mind, Benito. And I'm trying to follow you, Mr. City Manager, that, I've had the opportunity of being a counselor, being a mayor, working closely with my manager, and I'm trying to figure out what's best. Even the thing you talked about earlier, that's just a tool. Ultimately, it needs to be in writing, so it's gotta represent something somewhere, okay? But I think, you're sort of faced with the same challenge that I did when I became mayor. So much was going on outside of the manager's office that it was hard to go back and try and centralize the control. Okay. So, and I don't know, what your process is here as manager. Well, I think Tom Clayton, who was my manager at the time, had a weekly department director meeting every Monday morning, I think is what it was. I think that's what it was. So they pretty much got direction on a weekly basis unless something changed that. I had 8 counselors, okay? And to tell you the truth, from what I can see overall, it was easier to somewhat control with 8 compared to 4. People may say that just the pure numbers alone would change everything. It depends on the documents and how we put the process in line, and we have to push to make sure that that's the process that takes place. So I was faced with a community that was used to talking to a counselor. The counselor would just right there call the director, boom, it was done. In a lot of cases, I'm sure the manager never even knew that issue was addressed. That's very dangerous because at the end of the day, the one responsible for everything, including liability, is the manager, the day-to-day operation. So I think what we need to do is make sure that we have wording that's strong enough to allow you to pretty much give direction. Now, I'll give you a for instance, if you don't mind. I had a constituent call me. So my goal was, I visited with constituents all the time. My door was always open, and I visited with the community, did the role that the mayor did. And every so often, I'd go out and see what, the constituent was talking about. So let's just say the beginning of the month, I went out and took a look at what the constituent wanted. And what happened is that the water department had come in and tore up his sidewalk and put a new meter box or did some modification outside his sidewalk. So he called and said that he had asked the last administration and the last number of people to come and fix it. Well, I visited with him. I didn't give direction. I went back, went straight to the manager, and he wrote it down, and he said, I'll take care of it. So in my mind, once I handed it off, hopefully within a reasonable amount of time, it'll get taken care of. I see the gentleman 6 weeks later at the grocery store. And I said, how did that thing work out? And he looked at me and he says, you're kidding, right? And I said, excuse me? He says, no one's done anything. I said, okay, I thank you very much, I said. So I came back to the next day and I talked with the manager and I said, I visited with this gentleman. I gave you this information 5-6 weeks ago. Nothing happened. I said, that's pretty disappointing for me. He said, I'll take care of it right now. I was furious by that time because I was hoping that the process worked. Okay, so on the flip side, I guess, of that discussion is, it did get done, but after the second attempt. And people sometimes have been trying to do things for years, months, with this counselor, with that counselor, with this city manager, with this mayor. Then we have another one, and don't forget, we used to only have 2-year terms for mayor. So you could easily have a problem in one administration and get it fixed 2 administrations down the road. So I think it becomes also, and I know the date stamp's good and all that information's fine, But I think what the community is asking for indirectly is action. Now, I found it easier to visit with a manager and the manager do research, talk to me, and then I go back and see the individual, or even if I ran into the individual, we just can't do that. It was easier to deal with that. But the whole prospect of hope drove me crazy, okay? So when you look at what you're suggesting, and I support you, okay, number one, I think there has to be some understanding that there's also reasonableness to things. So, like if, this thing took 6 weeks, could have taken more, that's not reasonable. Why? Because literally that's the only thing this man gives a darn about, and we're not reacting to it. And you may have a director, and I've had some of those in the past too, that they were doing this in their office and they didn't really care about what was going on because they were in control, it's their dang department. I have an issue with that. At the end of the day, if they don't have the instruction that we all work for the community, utilities, streets, whatever the hell the department it is, those are the kind of things that we have to be reminded about. But I stand with your concern about there has to be a wording and a process that it has to funnel to some place so that you can have at least an idea. And maybe you don't have a problem, you just pass that idea, that issue to the director, it gets done. Now, if it comes back and says, oh, by the way, there's something down there, we've got there's an electric power line down there and there's a water line, we got some issues. Well, you have now the process to understand it, but I'm hoping that at the end of the day, the constituent understands that there's a concern and they're working on it. Keeping them in the dark's not the best thing either, okay? And we can't inform everybody about everything, but you can do reasonable stuff when you want to. So I support a process. Now, in your case, coming into this administration, I've told you in person already, I said, there's too much going on for you to handle all this by yourself anyway, okay? And I understand you're gonna get a deputy, okay? So, and I'm hoping that we're able to possibly carve out some information of the roles and responsibility of the deputy, but ultimately, I would imagine no matter who it is, they report to you. But that person has the opportunity to help you take care of some stuff. In the large scheme of things, a lot of things happened prior to you getting here. A lot of things. And a lot of stuff was ignored. And what that means is that they were ignored. Directors were doing whatever the heck they wanted. They were ignored. Counselors were directing traffic however they wanted. So all those things have to be laid out. So the only one that I think of the comments that gives me indigestion is meeting with the counselors that much. Okay? I met with them once a month, or they could come and see me literally at any time. But the city manager's time is precious, okay? I don't think I would have allowed a counselor to come every week. Because if you have 4 counselors right now, and you're meeting once a week, you have 40 hours in a normal week, that's already 10% of your days, of your week's gone. You have 8 counselors, that's a whole day, okay? So those are the things, Mr. City Manager, that I see, and I want to support you on that. But I hope you understand where I'm coming from a personal experience.
No, I absolutely do, and I hope it's okay to speak freely.
Yes, sir.
I hope this, for me, I feel it's important. Sorry.
It's, the other mics are on. There we go.
Okay. For me, it's really important to build a system or a mechanism that would be efficient, and along with that, hold employees accountable. Because I don't think we should build a system around an employee that may or may not respond to a situation. So I think we need to build a system that is logical, streamlined, keeps the proper annotation, notes, dates, those type of things, but then hold employees accountable. Because coming into this role, I have found there's a culture here that we haven't held people accountable. If you've seen individuals that I've had removed, as difficult as it is, and the backup that I have, I feel comfortable with the decisions that have been made. We have to hold people accountable. And so that comes down to when you hire an individual, you go through the resume of that individual, you know their strengths, you know their weaknesses at that point. To get them through their probationary period successfully, we need to be working on those areas that they are weak or they have room for growth, and work with that employee. They're an asset to the city, mold them to where they need to be. Our performance evaluations need to be very goal-driven with specific items they need to do, timelines to do it, and an understanding of why we're having them do it. We need to work with our employees more, and that's something I have found has lacked. And so I've been putting a lot of time into that. As far as working with the counselors, the reason I have done that is there was a lot of a lack of transparency in the past. I'm seeing that now. There's a lack of trust. And so working with the counselors, me working with them one-on-one, I hope is starting to build that trust, and we're getting more information out to the public. I agree, it's too much time. This is not a complaint. I'm trying to just share information of what it has been like here. In a year, I work over 3,000 hours. Okay, normal person works 2,080. In meetings, 1,098 hours this last year in meetings. So all my work time is my time. And I'm doing that because I made that commitment. There's a lot of broken things is what I'm getting at. And so when I went through the charter, I'm trying to relate what's broken and how does the charter support fixing it or creating the problems. And so that's been the direction I've taken.
So, Gino, you pretty much heard what he said. So, I think the manager always has an opportunity to make an administrative directive. You know about those, right, Mr. Manager? So I think where we can alleviate a lot of the headache is putting it here. And I know maybe the council will look at it and say, I don't think that's proper enough. You can always change it. But I think we need to help this manager and future managers understand that we have to set up some parameters because, and I look at your workload, okay? You're fixing up a lot of stuff that hadn't been addressed and at the same time trying to run the city as it is, okay? So, I would have gotten a deputy the second week, well, after maybe the first month. But the way I look at it, there's a lot of work that has to be done. And only because I've been here, done that. I think we were more population back when I was in, but we had the housing, but we didn't have senior center, okay? So there's some little trade-off that we've had in the size of the city. I'm just talking from personal experience, but, so I guess I'm asking, and all of you all are more than welcome to chime in, but is there a way that we may be able to put some of those parameters in this document to make it easier and not have to always put the manager and future managers on the spot every single time?
Mr. Chair, board members, and also specifically Member Pacheco, I realize I only answered half the question before. And the first half of the question, or the first answer, was that there are inconsistencies. The second answer is what goes into a charter and what goes into an ordinance and what goes into a resolution. And so I would say the commission would need to really balance a charter statement with maybe something that gets defined out in ordinance. And again, in some of our materials, we're going to see this where it says, the city manager shall do the following in accordance with ordinances that relate to it. As we're having this conversation, we're taking input from the city manager. The best parallel I can think of right now is in Article 7 regarding the financial procedures. And the very last line says, the budget shall be posted on the website. Well, that parallels sort of here. There's a charter statement that we want transparency, we want the budget posted on the website in a very short, simple sentence. And so you may be able to look for a short, simple sentence either in the managers section or back in the governing bodies section that says the city shall implement a reporting system for counselors to communicate constituent concerns to the manager. And it's about that long, it's about that direct, and then put the tagline of, is further dealt with in ordinance or resolution. And then they can define out what those procedures are and how they implement that.
Well, let me go back real quick, Gino, in regards to that. So the neat thing about putting it in the charter, okay, to some degree, and I'm following what you're saying, is we get the community to vote off, check off on that, okay? The danger of the ordinance is you get a new crop of counselors that doesn't like directions like that. They don't like that kind of stuff. So since it's vague up here in the charter, the ordinance, they'll take care of it. And it could literally flip completely from this is the structure to now this is what we want. So I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to listen to a manager, get input like we're doing, put some teeth into something, okay? And not let an ordinance modify it. And you know what I'm talking about.
Sure. Enough specificity that says there shall be an ordinance that implements this process.
Yeah.
But also not so finite that 5 years from now it's outdated.
Yeah, or against the law. We don't know. So I'm going to open up to any other members of the board. Anybody else have similar thoughts? Hopefully, we're not confusing too many people
I
with.
totally agree with you on that, Mr. Chair. The time that we're putting into this charter is first to put things in the charter and then for it to be into ordinance, whatever, where they just dismantle everything we've done and worked on, just for their own, for their own power, I'll use the word power, for their own power to do as they please. I think we need to have some, teeth to it.
May I ask about this master plan? Is that on the website?
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
And right now, just so you know, the master plan
Also is being about ready to go into review and will be updated next year. It's the year after your charter. So that will be the next review we're doing. We've put an RFP out for an attorney to help through the guidance. We've gone through that, and now it's time to pull a committee together and start reviewing that master plan.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From my perspective, the Article 202B that was referenced is pretty clear. What is not clear, so it specifies the separation of duties. And I think that's further in the document, we need to be more consistent. What I see as part of the challenge is what's the recourse if the charter is not followed? Because it's clear what action is taken if the charter is not followed. I don't think that's clear to me. So,
And I guess I'll defer back to the attorney because he'd have to handle that if that came up, I guess from the governing body, they would have to bring it up to consideration for the city attorney to review, right?
The answer on that isn't always clear either. There is the final section, Section 8 of the charter that relates to ethics. And in a cursory scan of that, I didn't see violations by governing body members of charter or ordinance or things of that sort included in there. It was more about conflicts of interest than it was outright violations of the charter or ordinance. And so that may be something that the commission can consider when we get to the ethics section. So it's a good placeholder if we can think of that when we get there.
thank you.
So just for clarification, real quick, Gino, in regards to that, if an individual in the community, a city councilor, the manager, the mayor, anybody felt that the charter was being violated, there is a process, right, through district court?
I'll thumbnail sketch it. There's an informal and a formal process that goes from counseling and coaching, typically by the chair of the governing body. There's engagement of counsel to coach a governing body member through the chair and legal counsel. There's censure. And then in statute, but it's got a legal standard to it for malfeasance, malfeasance or misfeasance, there's a judicial process where an actual lawsuit has to be filed. And so on this and then you've also got recall out there. So along this continuum, there are all those options. What's not in that continuum currently, and unless I missed something, because I only skimmed through that section, what's not in there is a violation of the ethics provisions in the charter, and that's just another place to hold a governing body member accountable.
So, Mr. City Manager, are we following the right questioning in your eyes?
You mean as far as the process here now, or the discussion of are we following the charter?
No, are we following what your wishes might be
I
in
believe
order
so.
for you to sort of have some kind of control?
I believe
of
so.
The inflow and the outflow.
I believe so. I believe so. And I just want to call out that I can adapt to whatever. My issue is if we have it written in the charter to be a certain direction of how communication should flow, then we need to follow that. If we change that direction, that's fine. We have to follow that. That's really where I'm coming from.
Okay.
And so with the way this is written here, the portal was a way of reducing the number of hours. It's the way of tracking the requests that are all coming in, so we're documenting. And then I can have a reporting mechanism or transparency to show where there's time delays, if there's issues, education matters that could be returned back to the governing body. So the portal is only a tool. But my concern is we don't follow the charter.
All right, anything else?
Oh, I have a lot of
Keep going.
pages.
Well,
Yeah, I'm
that
sorry.
one's an important
Yeah,
one because
is.
it
It's-
covers
it's
so
the biggest
much.
It's the biggest one of my day.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is.
I can see that.
And so I have just a few that probably won't take as long to go through, but D, for example, the governing body may conduct such investigations as deems appropriate into the affairs of the city or the conduct of any city department, office, agency, board, or activity. I don't want to hide anything. It's not my intention at all. But with that statement there, I think that there just needs to be some sort of a clarification, some sort of addition to this. I'm going to give examples. Right now, I have about 6 different investigations that are all personnel related, where I am utilizing attorneys because I'm not trained to do investigations. I want a neutral party gather the data and come up with a summary of what their findings were. My concern with investigations is if we have the governing body request investigation, I'd be very good with that. If we have the governing body, though, with the authority to conduct such investigations, then we need to be cognizant of, or they need to be cognizant of what is the budget for our attorneys, for example. Knowing personnel law, they need to make sure that questions that are being asked of directors or staff are appropriate, that they're trained to conduct an investigation themselves. So, like I said, I have about 6 of them right now. And if the governing body were to conduct those, I wouldn't do it myself because I'm not trained for it. Let's just put it that way.
I'm thinking of the Senate in Washington trying to conduct their own investigations. Gino, what do you recommend in regards to that?
I'm making a note.
Okay.
I'm making a note on that. Certainly governing body, you've got a whole personnel policy. You've also got competing sections of the charter, even within section 2.02. And it is our legal coaching. Typically, the governing body members stay out of personnel matters other than their direct appointees.
I can't see that happening at all. Go ahead, Benito.
I'll just say, just for the record, I do like the just changing that language to request instead of conduct. Seems to make a lot more sense in terms of clarity of how that happens, as well as liability to the city.
That's all it is.
And
Does an employee know they're being investigated?
It depends
Depends on the situation and the severity of the matter. It's important that we protect not only the employee that may be investigated, but those that have reported something. And so depending on the situation, we may put employees on administrative leave and allow us to conduct the investigations here, utilizing our risk management and safety team and attorneys to drive the proper questions and make sure that that the city's not creating an additional liability. So we try to remove the people out, but we typically don't disclose why they're being investigated. I'll tell you the stance that I have taken with the governing body. I'll let them know if an individual has been put on administrative leave and will not give any background because I don't want to start rumors, assumptions, or anything that could impact the investigation. So it's usually very generic of this individual has been placed on administrative leave effective immediately. Please do not engage in conversation, that type of thing. So does that help answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, and I think that's for the protection of the individual as well.
Yeah.
Because the investigation could clear them,
Absolutely.
right? And if
Absolutely.
there was more information than necessary provided to many people, then you're tarnishing someone's name to an extent.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying
That
that.
one's I think that's pretty easy, I think. Okay.
I've taken some notes.
On page 10, Article 3, under the mayor, section 3.02, the powers and duties. This is an area that I feel could be cleaned in some manner. Right now, I want to say the mayor and I have a very good working relationship, and we have a lot of communication going on. The mayor is called out in here as being the chief executive officer of the city and shall exercise all executive powers of the city as established by state law, except to the extent that such authority is delegated to the city manager. I feel that it would be beneficial to make sure that clarity is provided between the mayor and the city, because it's going to change administration to administration.
In
And
the mayor and the manager?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. In the current situation, we're lucky the mayor and I get along very well and we think a lot alike. But if we were to look at other administrations, that may not be the case. And so I'm trying to think whole picture, big picture. If we are paying our CEO $10,000, they may have a full-time job. How can they be the CEO and be here all day long? They're needed. There needs to be mechanisms and clarity, somehow clarity to define what is that mayor going to do and what's the expectation of the city manager. There's times right now, again, the mayor and I get along very well, but there's still times that we're working apart. We don't have a clear, definitive solution's not even right, definition of what I should be doing versus him. And so that causes a lot of ambiguity. I have been a CEO for a long time, and so my nature is jump in, do the business, and run it. The mayor also is very actively involved, and if we aren't working in tandem, our resources are being jeopardized. I don't know if any of you have seen my manager's reports that I deliver, but when you have too many leaders and no goals, the staff, their anxiety level goes up, everything becomes a priority because they will see the mayor walk down the hallway, and if the mayor says, I need X done, they're gonna jump and do it. If I walk down the hallway, it's the same way. You have the other governing body members doing the same thing. There's no clear goals right now. So everything is a priority, because how do you balance what you don't know is a goal or not a goal? So everything becomes a priority. And so this whole section has been difficult for me because I look back at my last year, we don't have that clarity or that structure in place. And so I would hope that the charter can do that to withstand changes in administration, have a mechanism or writing here that holds the mayor, holds the city manager accountable for what they need to be doing. So that needs to be defined in my mind.
So, Mr. Manager, in your mind, have you been able to figure out what the authority that is delegated to you?
No.
That's the crutch of the,
It's a real problem.
go ahead.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, one of the things that I'm kind of seeing be a continuing problem is that there's not really a chain of command for the staff. So it seems like it's, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. There's counselors that are getting directives or giving directives, and then there's the mayor giving directives, and then there's city manager giving directives, and it seems like it's putting the employees kind of confused at which ones are priority and what's not, and who do I listen to. And it seems to be like the reoccurring issue with all of the things that you brought up so far, that there's just not a clear, I would say scope of work, but like a clear, these are your responsibilities. And the council, I don't really understand why counselors or the mayor are giving directives to individuals that are employees when they, right? I mean,
Well, I mean, I'm going to hear my opinion versus.
What I'm experiencing. My opinion is for a mayor to be CEO, the mayor needs to be here then, and needs to be here full-time and shouldn't be paid $10,000 a year. That makes me a deputy to the mayor. That is not a mechanism I've had in the past. I'm a person that goes and goes and goes, and I push. But many times it creates conflict because I'm on a path going a certain direction, and all of a sudden I learn of a meeting that took place that I wasn't included in or didn't know about, and commitments have been made in another manner. And that doesn't look good to me. It doesn't make me feel good that I spend a lot of time doing something that is not going to come to fruition. So I personally have a hard time having the mayor known as a CEO. I personally feel, in my opinion, the mayor here is to oversee the governing body, ensure that our constituents' voice is being heard and brought forward, and the action takes place, but not necessarily taking the action themselves.
And I guess, I had been a city councilor before I became mayor. So I really got a shot of understanding how a lot of the departments worked, a lot of the directors worked. So one way we cured that, Tim, was that at least once a week, myself and the mayor and what I would consider an executive team would meet to discuss the details, okay? But at least we did it at least once. It wasn't something that was on a calendar. It wasn't just something that XYZ came up today. Let's call a few of the staff and we'll visit with it and get it done. So it allowed everybody to get caught up. And really at that point as mayor, I would get consensus from the discussion and pretty much give direction to the manager so that can be taken care of. Because I never wanted to be giving direction without the manager not knowing. Don't forget, I brought him in to be a teammate and literally just handed off to him so he could run it because 100% of it was his responsibility, good, bad, or indifferent, okay? So that's how we addressed the issue of communication. And then between me and him, we picked the administrative team that we would talk about with literally almost every week. Sometimes twice a week, sometimes every 2 weeks. But nonetheless, we had that opportunity. You guys don't have the time for that right now, so.
But I do want to make sure it's known I see the mayor just about every day. I'm
Yeah.
off today technically, so I didn't see him today. I see the mayor quite often. We communicate a lot. He's in meetings with me. And what's interesting is we end up being in meetings, and some meetings in front of people, it'll be said that city manager needs to make that decision, and in other meetings, not. It'll be taken through the mayor. There's not a clear separation. And that's what I'm saying, the difference between holding people accountable versus having a tool that forces that accountability. So,
And maybe I was just taking care of the PR. That's what made it easier.
but if I were to be full on honest, initiatives that are taking place now, if I were to ask the question of, is that in the best interest of the constituents based on data? Or is that based on opinion? And right now, I don't think I would have a clear answer. I need to know that the constituents, that initiatives that are being taken or pushed forward are for the best interest of the city, and that's something that the city needs versus an opinion.
I'm perplexed because I'm almost looking at this as we can't direct them to communicate properly or have a structure to communicate properly. And on the other hand, he's asking for help.
Would you say that you have an issue with section 302B2?
Well, that's what, he's number two.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what he's talking
That's what
about.
we're
Yes.
talking about.
How would you like to see
Because
that worded
I
removed?
feel that 302B, preside meetings of the governing body, be the chief executive officer of the city are two different things.
Yeah.
I think we're putting an awful lot on the mayor, and I'm sorry, but it excludes me.
Yeah,
So that's an issue I do have.
how would you word that, number 2?
Personally, I would not have your mayor as a CEO. You hired a city manager to run the daily duties. For me, I feel the mayor is an important role, and is to help guide, collect data from the governing body, which is collecting information from the constituents. It's the funnel, getting information from the constituents through the mayor to the city manager to give me direction of what to do, not to go do it on your own. And I hope I don't sound snide. That is not my intent at all. I am asking for help.
Gino, do you have any clarity?
Yes, so I'll start somewhat from the basics, and maybe it's semantics, and I can do some research on the semantics. But I'm gonna go back to 7th grade civics class. And the municipal form of democracy is modeled after the national form of democracy, which is separation of powers, 3 sections of government. You've got the executive department, for lack of a better term. You've got legislative, and you've got judicial. You've got a municipal judge. Legislative is technically the council, but the mayor sits as the chair of the council. The executive branch is headed by the elected mayor. And so the mayor is the head of the executive branch. And what may be throwing you is chief executive officer, which is, can be also known as a CEO, which is really now a manager,
Yeah.
right? That's why Albuquerque uses the term CAO, Chief Administrative Officer. But let's just get to the concept of the head executive, by whatever term, is the mayor. And the mayor cedes that executive authority to a city manager to do the day-to-day running of it. And that's what this paragraph says. Ignore the term chief executive officer, but just say, head executive for right now. So as the head executive, that executive does retain, the buck stops on the executive side with the mayor. But the mayor has delegated authority to a city manager. And the language you need is actually here, the language that the city manager needs, where it says, as provided in Article 5 herein. So those things that are delegated to a city manager to manage are in Article 5. And then you turn over to Article 5 and it's there. Here are the powers and duties of the city manager. So if there's additional clarity, if there are things that are gray, then the clarity should go in Article 5, number 1. And number 2, if we're dancing around it, and I will say it this way, I've told the commission that I tour the state, train a lot of governing bodies, a lot of city managers. And the most common issue we have is we've got clarity in documents, but nobody follows them. And sometimes that's more the issue. Stay out of personnel. Okay, it's right here in this section. Doesn't mean they stay out of, and I'm talking about all communities as a whole. Doesn't mean the governing body doesn't get engaged in personnel. Almost twice a month, I'm coaching some governing body, get out of personnel. So it's gonna go back to what's the accountability on the governing body, on the chief executive, on stay in your lane, right? Within this municipality and about 15 since in the last year, I've done exactly that presentation on effective governance. What is your lane? What are the limits of your authority? And stay there. It's a whole different thing if they don't stay within if governing bodies don't stay in their lanes.
Okay, we're seeing this play out in DC right now with the executive branch. So, so it almost looks like one word, officer,
Right.
should be removed.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is the parameters, I mean, the guardrails, go to section 5.
Go to section 5. Clearly, make sure it's clearly articulated that authority that originates in a mayor. It is originally vested in a mayor, but delegated to a city manager. It's got to be clearly articulated in Article 5. And then followed.
Yes.
Okay, so let me just ask one more thing. State statute, as it pertains to municipal
Right.
law, and it could be changed, like we're gonna modify our charter to say we're okay until state law, changes it or gives a direction or a direct, understanding. So what does state law say about a mayor?
I'm going there. The chair's, one of the chair's favorite things is that it's real-time legal research during these meetings. And
Well, we could be chewing bubble gum in between, you know what I mean?
Right. So as you're continuing your discussion, I'll get into the municipal code.
My next one is a little more simple.
Good, that's all right.
And so please proceed, but I'll find references in the code. I'll find the language used when they define the mayor as the chief executive. I'll find exactly what language that is. And again, I think the officer word is what's throwing us off. And maybe there's better language for that.
Well, we just happen to have a manager who's worked as CEO, possibly CAO, and COO, and a bunch of other names. And so it really depends how many, but that's corporate, right?
It is corporate,
Yeah.
but it's not a phrase we used in Texas, and I should have pulled that one up.
Okay.
One more to look at, though, is section 3.03 on page 11, the mayor pro tem. In this one, it's letter B. Actually, it's letter A. Mayor pro tem to assume the role of mayor during the temporary absence or disability of the mayor. I feel that needs to be updated. For example, we actually had the mayor go to Israel for a trip, and I was on Zoom with him. We actually used WhatsApp, and so we communicated on a daily basis. And there's no cost. That we had video, everything worked. But then when it came to the council session, we did utilize our mayor pro tem because he was out of the country. We've also had situations where the mayor has been within the country, different city, but has still led the meeting as mayor. And I just think we need to define what is absence, because some are comfortable with Zoom or Teams or whatever, and others are not. I just think that's an area that could use clarification.
Benito?
on the same page with you there, so we're
We already-
defining
we
what
got that.
We've been there.
attendance of a meeting
Been there,
is.
very good.
We've already got a first draft.
Gino got us on a good day.
Let's see, I jumped to page 14.
What article?
Let's see here, on, let me look at my notes real quick. Okay, so on page 14, section 5.01A, I have this kind of throughout the document of the mayor being required to provide a list of not less than 2 qualified candidates. There have been situations that we don't have 2 candidates. Right now is our internal in-house attorney. We had an attorney, we interviewed, 1. But yet the position's been posted for about 2 years. So we could not bring that individual forward. I'm not saying that the person would have been the attorney, but we couldn't bring them forward. I would recommend a change there. I would like to see personally something where a candidate's brought forward, maybe for a committee, for a position, whatever it is, and flesh out whether that individual should be in the position or not. If not, then we wait until another candidate comes along. But to have 2 at the same time doesn't always work.
That's about what we've come up with, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're
Great
tracking,
minds.
we're tracking.
That was another good thing that one day that Gino got us. Well, and I think it's not just the city manager. I think it also involved the city manager itself, all the officers. Because if it doesn't work with this one in the past, we just bring another name, till something finally stuck. So I think that part we sort of already gotten. So you're doing your homework pretty good there, Mr. Manager.
Lived it now for a year and a half. Letter C. Letter C, the city manager, if not already certified by the International City Managers Association, shall be working to achieve their certification while they're employed by the city. I would just want to call out, I had been attending my classes and I've been traveling to get this, but I do feel it needs to be recognized. It is a 5 to 6 year process, and to get your certification is based on the decision of the board of ICMA. It's not like there's a list of classes I can just go take and I'm going to be awarded this certification. There is a lot of discrepancy of private practice experience being applied towards your ICMA certification versus military. Military is very defined by title and what you do within that title. Me as a CEO in one company versus another company could be very, very different based on the size of the company and what was required. So you don't get automatic credit for work. Let's put it that way. My concern behind that one, yes, we definitely want the city or a county manager, for that matter, going through the ICMA program. But it would also be really good to try to retain your city manager so they can get it and be beneficial. And this is a revolving door position. So I just feel that one needs some work.
And I know that Gino's working on research, but I remember distinctly when we started this piece in the first committee. And I didn't realize that it took more than a couple of years to get the certification, okay? But that was then, this is now. So I guess, Gino, my question is, can you research to see if other cities are requiring this?
Yeah, short answer is yes.
Okay,
I'm not aware of other cities requiring it. And it tends, again, using Santa Fe as a recent example, there was media and public criticism for lack of, because there's no stated credentials for a city manager. So, for example, a master's of public administration or some, and someone who was appointed city manager with extensive governmental experience, but didn't have a master's of public administration. Well, it wasn't required. Or these other certifications, I'm not aware of Santa Fe having to achieve those certifications. It's just sort of the broader statement of shall have qualifications to run the city.
okay.
So that's off the top of my head, but I
Yeah.
will add
Yeah.
we've done our statewide polling to see if that's in any other ordinances, and we'll go back to those same communities.
And I think, if that was the intent when we started it back in the early 2000s, we have violated that part of the charter. Because I know for a fact, city managers have not even attempted to go to the classes or even register to do that. So that may be something to put on another list, if you don't follow through. Well, I guess it'll come under ethics again, that there's something there that would, be a red flag. But, I think we have to be reasonable to some degree. But I always thought that it was something, if you went every course date that they had for a year and a half, you'd get it in a couple of years. Well, the only thing is, Mr. City Manager, the qualifications for the elected officials, you have to be careful to how far you get with that, because that's the only ones that at the end of the day will guarantee a consistent flow of city manager. You know what I mean? Because I've seen that too.
And I can call out, when I attended Pittsburgh in the fall, there are 1,400 registered members of ICMA. Only 300 have their certification. So
How many towns?
that's across the entire United States.
That sounds good.
Yeah. My next one is page 15, section 5.03, city manager powers and duties. Again, I think that making that connection from the section, was it 3.01, I think it was, of the mayor and his role. This role, I think, could be built out or at least refer back to section 5.0, because the consistency to truly clarify what those positions do. Let's see here. Okay, let me go to the next page.
Am I bringing up things
That are helpful at all? Okay. Again, section 5.06 under chief of police, and this will continue through the document, but the two qualified individuals, bringing that forward.
So going back, Tim, what did you talk about, 5.03, the duties?
Just keeping a strong
Consistent.
connection from the previous section of the
Okay.
3.0 to this one to the 5.0.
Because the 5.03 talks specifically at the chief administrative officer. That's the first time
Which
I
is-
think I recognize it at CAO,
Yep,
right?
yep, yep.
Administrative officer.
And so it's just,
Yeah, we didn't get those acronyms squared away.
so, and I'm not calling it out a problem with the duties. I would like to see consistency between the sections. And then again, I think a tool that is put in place to ensure that both the mayor or the city manager know their roles. Again, that's an accountability issue, and your charter wouldn't address the tool per se.
Okay, so you're chief of police, 5.06?
Yes, that was, again, just another example of
Oh,
bringing forward two qualified candidates that we may not always have.
To go back a little bit to the ICMA certification, we're working toward it. Is that simply a requirement created by our city government, or is that a
Yes.
state law?
is not state law.
So would it be a can of worms if we were to say something like, or the equivalent? Like based on experience?
Tito?
I have a question on that.
I'm not sure how I'd answer that one because I believe ICMA is very valuable. There are classes, there's things that are there that can update us on leadership, trends that are happening within city, like water issues, sewage issues. There's things that can definitely be learned. It's a good portal. It's a good resource. It's just that certification process. To work towards certification is going to take 5 to 6 years.
While you have a full-time job.
Correct. And
is
and assume you're
unreasonable.
gonna keep your city manager because they rotate so quickly. And it's a very common trend across the country. And that was something that we had a lot of discussion about there. And so it's very difficult for us to get our certification.
Go ahead.
So if you could repeat the figures in terms of how many are certified, how many are not?
Over 1,400 registered members to ICMA. There are 300 certified city or county managers.
What's the cost of the certification?
That's a tough one because it's really about travel. Like it's held twice a year, different parts of the country. Mine costs about $1,400 to go to just the travel and hotel to go to one of them. But then when I went through my courses themselves, I was there for a full 7 days. They have the trainings on weekends. The classes ran between $100 and $300 each. When I got there. And so I paid for those when I got there and then reimbursed when I got back. So it really depends on what they're taking and what is offered at those programs. There is not a set curriculum that states you need to take leadership training or you need to take staff development or personnel. There's not a set curriculum. What happens is, me as an example, I would take all of the work I've done in the past and given job descriptions from those companies to show what I did. They will then score it and judge it to see how many points it may be worth. Had I been retired military, for example, and I had retired at a certain level, they would know specifically by title what a person did because the military is very clearly defined. Private sector, corporate sector is not.
So work experience does kind of fit under the definition of equivalent.
Yes. Yes.
So when these 300 people that are certified, they probably could get a job anywhere in the country that wouldn't stay in a small town,
Could be. Could be.
unless they love it here like we all do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
So what I see in this document, though, I don't see any, where it doesn't say required within 1 year, required within 2 years. It just basically states, be working on it.
Actively working
Me
on it.
personally, I don't see an issue with that because, it benefits the city, it benefits the city manager. And it just says working on certification. It doesn't specifically say work on it and attain within 1 year, work on it and attain within 2 years.
It would be nice to
Obtain that
It
certification.
would be nice to obtain it,
Yeah.
but, so
Stay long
again,
enough to get
your
it.
recommendation, you're saying to remove it, or your recommendation is
The
to
rec-
attain it within a certain amount, or for
My
retention? What-
recommendation is just to understand, you need to have your city manager in place for a period of time so they can even get through 5 to 6 years of training through ICMA. For me, it's a stability thing.
For me as well, I mean, I'm a
Yeah,
big
there's-
believer in consistency, but when it comes to, government,
Yeah.
and we know
Yeah.
that's,
Exactly. So,
doesn't
so,
happen,
so if we want them to attend the training, that's great,
right? So,
So you began this process when you began this job?
For the ICMA, yes. Yes.
And I know that city managers in the past did, but not all of them even signed up for it and never did in the tenure they were here. So that's, they violated the charter by not even signing up. But nobody was held accountable. So, it's almost like everything we have written down here, somebody's already tested it here in our
was used
community.
against-
So, it's one of those things where, I sort of agree a little bit with Joel. Attaining it, taking the classes, which you see the benefit of, I think was still good. But I think it's, at this point, we wouldn't be able to achieve the point unless we keep a city manager 6, 7, 8, 9,
Right.
10 years. Then we have a shot at getting there. So,
Isn't a city manager usually, or at least in our history, don't they usually get changed out when we get a new? Don't
we were
they
just talking
Yeah.
about
Every
that.
couple of years.
That's
Yeah,
called
like,
politics.
it kind of defeats the purpose of them signing up for the course.
And that's my point. It's in here. Just be realistic with the expectation of what's
What it
going to
means.
happen.
you're gonna still check on other cities, right? There's probably not gonna be many,
Checking on others.
okay? So did you,
The first project.
Is there another, is there another type of certification that's different with this for city managers to be able to obtain quicker than that, or no?
Not that I'm aware of.
No?
No, and I have researched that more to see if there's other certifications, because I was hoping that would be counted towards my efforts towards the ICMA, and there was not. I couldn't find any other certifications like that are government-focused.
But you also can't start the ICMA without being appointed as.
You need to have a sponsor. So City of Las Vegas was my sponsor. Yeah.
so I guess, in regards to just that piece, we'll have to talk a little bit more about that, see how we address it. I had a thought that escaped me. I think I was thinking about Gino and all the homework we're giving him. Did you get a chance to find the mayor under state statute? Do you want to talk about it now? Is that all right?
I'm going to Las Cruces just to get additional verification because I'm already so reliant on Santa Fe charters. But in statute, in the municipal code for non-charter cities where they create the definition of mayor. So that I've looked there. I've looked at City of Santa Fe's charter where they get to define the role of mayor. Now I'm looking at Las Cruces, but in those first two locations, they define it as chief executive officer of the municipality. And so it just needs additional differentiation as we go into 5, or that the clarity that the manager assumes certain chief executive officer roles on behalf of the mayor.
So if we got on a time machine and went forward, none of us are here, there's a new mayor, new manager. Really, at the end of the day, what it's gonna boil down to is, to what degree does the mayor wanna give up the wording that we had here earlier? Where do I have it? Authorized, the authority to delegate is gonna be the issue.
Well, that's a common concept. What's delegated may be more what you need to examine. So the mayor is, I'm going to use the term because it's there, the mayor is the chief executive officer of the executive branch. And all authority for the executive branch, the buck stops with the mayor.
Yeah.
But the mayor's, in Las Vegas, the mayor in Las Vegas is not a full-time mayor.
Right.
It's a full-time city manager. Therefore, there's a delegation of the day-to-day chief executive officer authority to a city manager. And so the concept of delegating, that's common. What's delegated is what would be focused on in Article 5. If there's a lack of clarity or something that's missing, then we would add that to Article 5,
Okay.
number 1. Number 2, then, thinking of sort of, call it the parade of horrors in the future. There's a change in mayor comes in. The bigger issue I think you have with regard to this tension of delegation is it's delegated in writing, but they're not abiding by the writing. That's what we're running. That's where municipalities run into the most is, oh yeah, I know that's delegated. It's right here in paper, but I'm the mayor, doggone it. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make that decision. That's the natural tension in government, and that's why actually going back to the mayor's authority on removal of a city manager, the mayor can recommend the removal of the city manager. Okay, we're butting heads. I brought this person to the table. We're not working out. I need to replace that person. So the mayor still retains that authority to bring a manager to the table, delegate the authority, and then part ways if they need to. And those are all common concepts, but the clarity of what authority a city manager has, that's the Article 5 examination.
And I support that. I totally agree with what you're saying. I'm not trying to be contentious. I just think we need a tool in place to make sure that authority is
Defined from mayor to city manager, so there's no ambiguity.
And then
And
I
that would be
think-
outside of the city charter, I believe.
Yeah, and then going back to the ICMA stuff, I know Municipal League has, courses or, clerks get together, right? You guys have like a class and you guys get up to date. What's that?
3 years.
3 years? So, code enforcement people do, all these community development directors, all of these entities do. But there's not one for city managers, huh? There's not a training for city managers. I know mayor and council has, when you get elected, you get that packet. You have a regional meeting and boom, 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 you go through the course of what your duty should and shouldn't be. Maybe those guys need to, push their requirements a little tougher to make it easier when they get back to their communities. Because, especially when you have that many, personalities in a council, you everybody needs to be in their lane, but I'll tell you one thing, there's no stripes on the road sometimes. So I understand that.
Harping on this one, I have to bring up the last city manager, not his performance or anything about him. But I sat through the unemployment hearings. And so the individual was removed. It was voted on, removed. Unemployment was filed for. We contested it. I was in the role at that point. We contested it. Then it went to the next step to court. And in court, it was determined there were no clear rules for the city manager. There were no reprimands to the city manager. He didn't know why he had been, let me rephrase that. There was no documentation as to why he had been terminated. We ended up paying out a significant amount of money. I had the exact same contract. And I'm not saying that as a threat in any way. What I'm saying is we need to have something documented going from administration to administration of what the rules are, or we're going to put the city in liability because New Mexico is notorious for paying unemployment. So, and in that particular case, it paid out the entire contract, paid out the entire para contribution, had the person stayed to the end of that time. And, oh, sorry.
Mr. Chair, I was in this public meeting that's also streamed, talking about direct personnel matters.
Okay.
I apologize.
So I guess, well, we'll have to limit our comments then to that, no matter what. I understand. But I guess it's good to know that there's something out there. So we'll take a look at trying to put the parameters of the responsibilities of each entity. In my mind, this is a mayor, council, manager form of government, okay? And, and I've seen how other types of government work. Raton has 5 commissioners. After they get elected, one of them's picked as mayor. That's the way that goes up there. But in our form of government, we have some real clear stuff. So let's see how we can work on that. Do you have more, Tim?
I can stop.
No, we want to make sure
This is your day.
this is your time.
Well, there's one more element, and that's under Article 6 with the creation of, or general provisions of governing boards and commissions, and under A with the creation, in addition to those permanent boards and commissions established by this charter, the governing body may, by ordinance, establish such boards and commissions of duration greater than 1 year with such powers, purpose, scope, and authority as deemed appropriate by the governing body. That's something that I would love to see defined more from committee to committee or any commissions. The reason I bring this one up is the finance committee is not listed in here, but yet many of our votes are based on what did the finance committee recommend? What is the authority of our finance committee? I thought governing body decided our budget. They decided what to do with our monies, but the question is asked. And so I think that, again, there's a lack of clarity there. It will be brought up with the lodger's tax, that committee. What was their recommendation on these dollars? The governing body asks these questions, and so I really would like to know what is the authority of that committee. Could the lodger's tax say, we're going to fund all of these things because we know that we have X number of dollars coming in from lodger's tax? Or do we want them to be an advisory committee and say our recommendation is X? It just, in my mind, I feel it needs to be defined.
I thought the word advisory was part of every committee's name.
So did
It
I.
was-
But that's not always the action.
Is that the only committee you've seen issues with or
Well,
concerns?
let me bring up an example right now. We have a utility committee. Their engagement with us with the water treatment plant or wastewater plant, interacting with our negotiations with FEMA are not included. Should their scope be take information to them, and would they have recommendations then on what our water treatment plant is? Or is that gonna be a discussion that I bring with my consultants from Geosciences and the Water Drinking Bureau or state agencies where we're gonna get the permits for a certain type of water treatment plant? We don't have that defined.
Well, maybe what we'll do, if you don't mind, Mr. Manager, because I really, I'm starting to see some issues here with that. If you don't mind, after you return, and you've been able to sit down and stand up for a few days, because I know it's gonna be interesting, could you put us together a list of which ones we should consider? Because I think what we can end up doing is making sure that, not only do we title them properly, but maybe we have a statement, Gino, that says all of these, independent committees appointed or whatever, they're all advisory boards to the city. So, I've served on all these committees. We had a police committee, we had an airport committee, we had utility committee, we had finance committee. So, and I look at now and we don't have them all listed here. I think we need your help, if that's okay.
And that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
I'm not combative in any way. It's
No,
just
I understand.
I'm trying to relate this document to what I'm experiencing.
Okay. We need
Oh,
to-
Mr. Chair, I do have a question, Gino, in terms of, when you look further in the document under that same article, let's just take Article 6.06, and it seems to be pretty consistent with each board. But it indicates 606B, governing body shall establish by ordinance the powers and duties of the board.
Correct.
So is the ordinance consistent for each board, or do we have a separate ordinance
For
for
each board. Each board, because they've got, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Pacheco, the ordinance should be separate by board because they have unique requirements. Lodger's tax, for example, gets its requirements from state statute. And then those would be different requirements than a police advisory commission. It's not gonna have to make recommendations on the use of lodger's tax funds. So they're varying, but you do see, now, it's a good rationale for saying by ordinance, define this by ordinance. We recognize it in charter. A lot of these committees aren't always in charter. What I typically see in charter are the council-related committees that are comprised only of councilors, which I think is a struggle this municipality and others have, because they're mixing citizens and councilors very frequently. And it just becomes dominated by whichever councilor happens to be on a committee. Even though it's addressed in here, it's not followed. So, what am I trying to say, so I can wrap this up? What I'm trying to say is, the structure is here and it's a good structure, but whether or not the governing body is actually passing the ordinance to provide a definition is one. Two, if they do pass the ordinance, is it being followed? And three, are there, and we've touched on this briefly, are there committees that should be council committees, which are currently hybrid committees of councilors and citizens? Are there committees that should be in the charter where, such as a finance committee comprised only of 3 councilors? To review, make recommendations, develop the expertise in finance so that when you come to a governing body meeting, you can say, 3 of us already reviewed this, here are our concerns, and we recommend passage. That's coming from councilors and not from others. So that's a lot to answer. The general structure, again, is good. Following through with it is the struggle.
And I would add for the commission members, if we recommend changes to this specific section, I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that some of the definition is in ordinance, yeah.
And we don't want a conflict. You know, we've been preaching consistency, so we need to make sure we stay consistent there.
Yeah, and I'm asking the manager to put a list together for us in case we missed one. Like finance is pretty important. Is that currently all city councilors only or general community, mix?
And so
Okay.
combined.
Well, last meeting, we met with city council, who pretty much, the majority of them seemed to think that councilors dominated the committees and shouldn't be on the citizen committees. And, that seems reasonable to me also.
But Gino pointed out that in other communities, certain committees, and I'm thinking finance, are mostly, I guess, mostly they're made up of city councilors.
2 committees then.
Yeah, well, at least finance, that one that comes to mind first.
That.
But, you know, right now, we can't put, well, we can only put 2 on the finance committee.
You can put 3 so long as you still comply with the Open Meetings Act.
Okay, but going back that same thinking, and then other committees could be made up of, you know, cross-section of the community, and if there is a counselor on, that could be an ex officio.
We will get to this section for a greater review.
Yeah.
Ex officio is also recognized in the current charter.
Okay, yeah, I think so.
Now, which committees have ex officio and which are all counselors are gonna be an important discussion because.
Well, I want to go off of your lead,
The ex officio.
because your thing at the council meeting, the joint council meeting, with us, you pointed out somehow how those work, and I think those are pretty much normal at this point, especially with communities of this size. Yeah,
Some are.
Yeah.
Well, the counselor only committee.
yes, council on committees.
I did point that out.
Yeah, okay, we can take a look at this, like you said, that sounds good. Anything else, Mr. Manager? Okay, I do have a question for you, and I don't know what section it is, but, I think, and explain to me the process. You have a employee, and I don't know if it's what do you call it, exempt, non-exempt. You have to go through the process. In most cities, I think we already did the research, and Gino, correct me if I'm wrong. The city manager, since the city manager runs the day-to-day operation, has the authority to hire and fire, okay? So I think the difference is in this community or this charter is it has to come back to the governing body for confirmation. That's not normal from what we understand, right, Gino?
Correct.
So that's one area I'm hoping to get your support on, if that's something that you would like to see some clarity or at least a modification in.
Absolutely. You know,
Again, it goes back to structure versus accountability. I hope that I'm held accountable to do my due diligence in determining if a person should stay or not based on their performance and not just a personal opinion of do I like a person, not like a person. So I'm gonna clearly state that anybody that I have recommended for a removal, I have sufficient backup that I can sleep at night, and I have done my due diligence. I bring that forward and speak to the governing body, and then a vote is taken on what to do. My personal view is I'm working with those individuals on a daily basis, and I can see their performance overall. I know whether additional training was needed. Was it offered? Was there a communication issue? I know the background of what happened with those individuals, and I feel that the person that supervises them should be the one that also determines hiring and termination, and not brought to the governing body. I would go so far as to say the officers as well, because the way the contracts are written now, we don't have goals in those contracts. The contract talks more about the compensation, but does not give goals other than to our chief of police, which is the first contract where we went through and actually put goals. My challenge with that, though, is had the chief of police been under my purview, I could have utilized my resources to look at the goals that are in there, and are they achievable, and are they relevant to law enforcement versus maybe an opinion or what was thought to be the right thing to put in a contract. There could be a difference. And so I'd really ask you guys to consider with the daily business that everybody report to the city manager. Doesn't mean we get rid of transparency and communication to the governing body. By all means, they need to know where there's liability to the city, where there could be any risk of erroneous communication on social media or anything that would impact the city. That's my responsibility to get to the governing body, but I really feel that I should be the supervisor of staff.
Okay, Gino, and I'm gonna throw a good one quickly. I just picked up all that. I don't even know how I'm still remembering this stuff. I'm sorry. So I'm looking at what he's saying is two things. Officers and the process for them, right? And then everybody else. Am I looking at that right? Because we're pretty picky about the officers here.
Term is appointees.
What's that?
Appointees.
Okay.
Appointees by by typically the mayor with approval of the governing body.
So, but those primarily are the officers, right? We have the manager, the manager for sure, the clerk, the chief of police, and the attorney, I think.
That's it.
So, yes, and I've seen a blend throughout the state of appointees. Most often is manager, clerk, attorney are the appointees. I do see, depending on the community, some communities have a police chief as a direct appointee of the governing body. I also almost as equally see it as someone subordinate to the manager. Same with fire chief. I have seen some municipalities where fire chief is an appointee. I've also seen it where the fire chief is a department director responding to the manager. So all of those are out there. I have seen circumstances where attorneys, the attorney responds to the manager. It's a little bit, I'll tell you the pluses and minuses of that, and that is that the city attorney really should be the governing body's attorney. If you place it under a manager, it becomes the manager's attorney, the administration's attorney. And because it's directed by, the attorney's directed by the manager. Therefore, they're gonna have conflicts. And I've been actually in-house as administration attorney for the public schools, where I answered to the superintendent. So my role was different than the contracted attorneys who were attorneys for the Board of Education.
So how are,
things to think about.
what are you here?
What am I here? I'm contracted counsel,
To,
sometimes to the governing body.
okay.
They hire me and fire me. I'm teammates with the city manager.
And I actually view that a little bit differently. And the reason being is
I did the RFP, I did the contract, I manage the budget of it, and I sign off on all the invoices. So it puts me in an awkward position again. I view Gino and I as a very close co-working team, and I consult with him a lot on city business. And I can't speak to the percent of time governing body would contact you, but I am the one that's signing off on checking off every instance that we've communicated with Gino. And so I'm signing off on that. However, if we had
Which is consistent with our 35 school districts. My teammate, 95% of the time is a superintendent or a city manager.
whereas if we had
in-house attorney, they would report to the governing body, and then invoicing wouldn't be an issue. It is. So it's kind of different having a consulting attorney versus I actually have 4 total. And if it were an in-house attorney, it'd be completely different.
So we currently, and I'm not talking present manager included or present, but if the city council wanted to do something, they pretty much could have an executive session and pull the attorney in, right? To talk about the manager, right?
Yes, and that's why, and it's a subtle technicality, at least the way we teach it. We're teammates with the city manager, we're teammates with the school superintendent. But if they're at odds, because ultimately we're approved by the governing body, we're the governing body's council. Now, we hope that never happens, but again, our 95 might even be an underestimate of the percentage that we work with our teammate, the city managers or the superintendents. But
I've been there.
yeah, yeah, it's
I
all
was there, yeah.
like contract negotiations. Because the attorney gets called in for contract negotiations, even for a city manager or a city clerk. They're representing the board in those negotiations. And sometimes separations, the attorney would be representing the board in separations.
Okay. We're completely confused now. Oh, okay. No, we're not. No, it gives us some clarity, but you make sense with your 90-some%, review of what your work is.
Our number one teammate's the city manager,
Okay.
without a doubt.
Anything else, Mr. Manager?
No, sir.
I hope I gave you what you were looking for.
Anybody else have a question?
Mr. City Manager, do you view this portal as a huge solution, and do you have the authority to create it?
I don't know that I have the authority to create that because it would potentially change the dynamics now of anybody from the governing body just coming to my office or having set schedules. So it'd be a dynamics change. As far as establishing it and building that tool, I don't see that as the problem. It would be a cultural shift. Because right now I have a very open door policy and there's a lot of people walking through that door. So that portal would change that behavior. And again, it could start creating a sense of a lack of availability or a lack of transparency or honesty or whatever. So.
Anything else, members?
I just want to thank you for your time here today, City Manager, and for being honest of everything over the charter and all that. We'll take everything into consideration and do what's best for the constituents in the community of Las Vegas.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for your time, Mr. City Manager. Enjoyed your comments and your expertise was valuable. Thank you.
I too want to thank you, Tim. And I could tell you that the last Charter Commission did not talk with the manager. The first one did.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And enjoy your time off.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. I guess next on the agenda is the review of all the assignments we gave the city attorney, and now he has more, and we haven't even started, so I'm sorry, Ashley, you're not gonna be able to leave till tonight at 7, and, or
8:30.
8:30 would be fine. No, let's just be careful here with our time, too. We gotta make sure that we cover all this stuff. Go ahead, Benito.
And I do want to say that I will have to leave today at 5:30, so.
Okay. Well, I think we're looking at 5-ish anyway, if at all possible. Gino, with the stuff you sent us today, because I sort of took a glance at some of it, I almost think that we have to, maybe stop now so that we can digest that. But I think you made some pretty good notes of the city manager's recommendations. Okay.
Mr. Chair, members, made good notes of the city manager's comments. Interestingly enough, I think we all saw where we overlapped. And there was already some common sentiment on the feedback from the city manager. So I've got those notes. Let's keep those notes in mind as we review these. I'm just going to introduce them in the next 5 minutes. It's subtleties, sometimes it's on the fly. But on your headers, where it says revised edits, those are edits where I've already presented to you what I call anticipated edits. Anticipated edits are my first read-through in which I'm making edits either to comply with legal changes or I'm doing highlights of paragraphs that I think you should really take a look at. And then for the first three, mayor, municipal court, and officers, directors, and employees, we've actually already reviewed those in meetings. You've given me feedback. And so I brought back to you today the edits I've made based on the feedback. So if you'll read the ones that say revised as we've gone through this, I want to check Gino's work to make sure it reflects the sentiments of the commission. Then with Articles 6, 7, and 8 has 0 edits. But I still printed it out so we would have it in front of us. I still submitted it so we would have it in front of us. These are anticipated edits. With boards, commissions, I did make some edits to the appointment and removal process especially. I did do some good governance edits, mainly ordinance. We can't describe everything in a charter. It changes. It's got to be more nimble than changing every 5 years. So we're saying we establish it and then define it in ordinance. In some of my other municipalities, I'm running issues and I removed the language of we can establish a committee by motion. That is causing the biggest trouble statewide because we go, oh, I move that we do this ad hoc committee and they go study this. I was just in the city council meeting in central New Mexico where that committee came back and did a report. Oh, you're outside your scope. Well, your motion didn't tell us the scope. Oh, we don't like your members. Well, your motion didn't say who the members were. So it's got to be an ordinance or even faster, a resolution where things are written and defined. So those are the types of edits. As you take a look at that, is just adding some good governance and consistency in appointment and removal and the votes of the council and the mayor. 7, I didn't have anything to edit there, and I don't know if either the clerk or the director of finance has any changes to this section, but I didn't find any legal changes I needed. This is where, in the very last line, it says, once approved by the governing body and the Department of Finance, the budget shall be posted on the city website. This is where you might find other bits of information that are very important to say, you know what, let's post this on the website too for transparency purposes. And I've forgotten the example we used with the city manager, but you could do that with master plans. You could do that with the portal. They shall establish a portal for counselors to submit constituent feedback to the city manager, just brainstorming there. That takes us to 8, elections, initiatives, referendum, and recall. The reason this is taking longer than expected is I've just got to compare it to the brand new Local Elections Act. I can foresee that the lion's share of this will be replaced with the Local Elections Act.
Yeah.
Follow the Local Elections Act for each one of these sections. So that's just gonna take me a lot more time to cross-reference them.
Okay. I guess because we've, in my mind, I think our next meeting is April 23rd, right?
I thought those are soon.
There's,
We've been having them maybe.
yeah, hold on.
She's gonna.
Yeah, I'm looking it up. April 2nd.
April
Next week.
Next week.
Boy. Okay,
Is that?
Yeah, next week.
I do have it down. So I was gonna say, if we don't have one right now, we're, scheduled, we better do one, but it looks like this one will cover it. Because all we did was really get this information from the manager today. So we just need to get caught up on all this. Go ahead, Ashley.
I have a question on chief of police. Is there like a contract or limit? Cause I think I've seen where that's also a problem where, we're switching out chief of police every so often. Is there like a contract that we keep them, like a?
It's appointed. They're appointed by the mayor.
Yeah, some of my edits, in what you have in front of you on officers. I started moving out a direct reference to contract because one of the core tenets was the appointees serve at the pleasure of the governing
Yeah.
body. And later it says, according to their contract, those are two different things. Because they're no longer at the pleasure of the governing body anymore, they're subject to the terms of the contract. So I deleted the reference to the contract, still allowing for, if they want a contract, they can. But I didn't want that contract reference in there, because then it creates an expectation of a contract. And I don't know, are contracts used for the appointees?
It's every 2 years is what they have right now.
And so you get a written contract with a 2-year term in it. Okay.
You have one too, Cassandra? You do? So it'd be you, the chief, and the manager.
And if we had an in-house attorney.
Okay, but we have an outside.
We had an attorney.
So let me ask a question, and I didn't know whether I needed to ask it earlier or later. We see what's happened with all these university presidents and these golden parachutes and all kinds of stuff that we have going on. I think it's almost, it behooves the community to have some clarity that we're not doing, contracts that are going to be, golden parachutes, and especially, I'm more concerned about the position of city manager. Okay. If we're throwing the whole bus of responsibility on one person, and they're not able to take care of this, there has to be some safeguards that the governing body can say, you know what, we told you to do X, Y, and Z, you've only done X. We're not happy with that, we need to be able to do something, right now. And I don't know if the Attorney General has had some, I think he did some stuff for university regions, right? To sort of put some guardrails on how far they can get, right?
They're doing mandatory training. That's legislation that was passed in this session.
Okay.
Mandatory training for university regions.
Yeah, I'm thinking of what happened at Western.
Yeah, and he's also suing.
Yeah, so I'm saying, really, all this stuff, we go through all this whole thing, and all of a sudden, we put all this money behind these people, and then all of a sudden, well, for whatever reason, they can't get along with them, they are gone, they still get the money and they're gone. What do we get out of it, as a community? We're putting money into running the operations of our community. So I don't know how far we can go. Is that something we should even consider, Gino?
I think it's hard to predict. So, but it originates out of the contract question. And I'm gonna do what I do best. I'm gonna argue both sides of this simultaneously. The use of contracts is not only to provide stability to the employee that gets the contract, but it can also be a recruitment tool, especially if someone's moving from outside the community to come into a city manager role. Okay, I'm gonna move my family, and I'm gonna move 60 miles or 600 miles to come be your manager, but you might fire me next week. I can't take that chance. So it reduces your pool if you don't have a contract. It expands your pool if you do. The other trade-offs are if you provide a contract, well, now you have to negotiate termination more often than not because you have a contract in place. you know what, you've been here a year, you're on a 2-year contract, this isn't working out, we're gonna negotiate your departure. Which ends up in a payout of at least a portion of that contract. So contracts help in recruiting, they hurt in termination. Lack of contracts helps in termination, hurts in recruiting. So I don't want to limit the governing body's discretion to contract if they wish, but at the same time, they need to be aware. Now, a bad negotiation of a contract, that's hard to limit in a charter. It really is. And, you know, I don't want to make a judgment directly because I wasn't involved. I don't know the facts and circumstances as to why that occurred. But something that's perceived as bad, that's hard to limit in the charter.
Just thought I'd ask a loaded question. Is there anything else before the commission? So we're all slated to be back soon.
We are,
Go ahead.
and you've got some reading and editing. I don't mind, and Commissioner Britt, you've been really good on this too. I really don't mind if someone catches my editing errors. Because, you know, me looking at it, I get bleary-eyed and I'll miss simple words.
Because we're coming back quickly next week. Oh, yeah, it is. No? So can you send us stuff beforehand if you have it available? If you have it available.
Yeah, the hard part is we're coming back so quickly. My due date would be today. Right?
We'll send it out Friday.
Yeah. And I'm,
So do we follow on the same thing? It has to be given to us 72 hours prior?
Correct.
no, your agenda
no,
has to be
just the
posted
agenda.
72.
Oh, no, the agenda doesn't bother me at all.
The tradition, and it worked, I was good about this for 2 meetings in a row.
Yeah.
I was getting it to you in time for her emailing it out. I'm just so backed up, you know, this week, Taos Monday, Taos and Los Lunas yesterday, here today, Deming tomorrow and Friday. I can honestly say the amount of work I need to do on 8, I won't be able to complete that by Friday.
Well, we sort of have enough already to start off with anyway. Okay, go ahead, Meredith, you had a question?
I'll save it.
You will?
Well, it might be an open-ended question, whether a charter is enforceable.
Oh, well, that's what we're gonna,
Whether a charter is enforceable? Short answer is yes. It's just enforceable through litigation and courts.
No quick solution.
It's towards the end. It's not even in our assignments thus far. There's the ethics portion. I think if you can add to that continuum one extra accountability in the ethics portion of the charter, that it's a violation of the ethics code to intentionally and or repeatedly not follow the charter, that's an extra ding. It's an extra accountability measure. That's what's popped into my head today as we've had these discussions and as I've reviewed the back end of the charter. I think you have an opportunity to add something there.
that sounds good. Anything else, Benito?
Mr. Chair,
Oh, go ahead, Joseph.
if I may briefly, I just looked at my calendar. I can't speak for Mr. Pacheco, and I'm getting a nod, so I think maybe that's a green light. Okay. We have a university event next Wednesday, the 2nd, so we will not be in attendance for that meeting.
Is that correct?
This was just scheduled on Monday of this week.
That is correct. So
We'll be like we'll have the state police go find you guys and bring you over here. So we'll have a quorum? We will have a quorum.
You should still have a quorum, yeah.
Okay, I appreciate the information. That makes a difference.
I'd rather give it to you on the front end, so.
I appreciate that. Anything else to come before the commission?
If there's an opportunity to email any comments prior to
That's all
Wednesday
I was
that
gonna
we
say,
can
yeah.
discuss.
That's good.
Thank you.
So is it okay, Madam Clerk, that we adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Gino, do you have anything else?
I'm gonna make a comment on the record since I just talked about emailing comments in.
Yes.
Please do not do it to the entire membership, just do
It'll
it
be
to the
to
clerk
you,
and I.
to Madam Clerk and you, yes.
Yeah, we don't want any risk of Open Meetings Act violation.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Well, if we've done enough today.
to adjourn.
There's a motion, is there a second? Motion and a second, Joseph and Joe. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.